Yeah, we are off, and I am happy that you are here with me today. It's Wednesday. It's the 21st of February as I post today's show, and I will be joined by Professor Eric Segall. Lots to talk about with constitutional law professor of Georgia State University, Eric Segall. That conversation begins at about 17 minutes in, but I have a whole bunch of headlines and sound audio clips for you, as I do every day, and then I'm headed up to the mountains with Julia, where I will be skiing the very steep and very difficult Hunter Mountain in the Catskills. Just me and my girl today, and then we'll see Ava up at college and my parents. It's going to be a great, busy 3 days. I'm really looking forward to it, and thank you very much for your support. That allows me to be able to do this work each and every day, bringing you the news and headlines, helping you keep informed on what's happening in your country, in the world, on our planet, and of course, bringing on the best guests we can find to explain it all to us. Thank you very much for your feedback so far on this week. A lot of you loved Tara Palmieri of Puck News yesterday. Looks like tomorrow I'll have Sam Youngman of Today's Big Stuff, and as promised, Dan Beckerman from the Center for Biological Diversity. I'll have two guests, I think, tomorrow. Dan is going to talk about the potential of emissions rules being rolled back on cars, and we had a great conversation about that. Very interesting and important. Thursday of this week, I'm scheduled to tape an interview with Pulitzer Prize winning author and investigative journalist Steve Cole, who is one of my favorites, maybe one of the best journalists of our time, and his new book is The Achilles Trap: Saddam Hussein, the CIA, and the Origins of America's Invasion of Iraq. Really great book that I cannot put down. Dr. Jason Johnson set to join me, and we will see who else we can get on the show this week. I can't do it without your support. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic is what keeps us fueled. Totally independent, no ads. I hope you noticed that, but I can't do it without your $5 subscription or more. You can always pay as much as you want, and many of you do. You can always upgrade your subscription if you're getting a lot out of it. And thank you very much to those very generous folks who do. All right, let's get to the headlines today. There is no bigger headline than this one. The key witness to impeaching President Biden, the guy that lied and said the Bidens got millions of dollars from foreign entities, admitted that now officials associated with the Russian intelligence were involved in passing the story about Hunter Biden to him. Prosecutors allege in a filing that Alexander Smirnov, who is an American and Israeli citizen apparently, told an FBI handler that the Russian intelligence service intercepted several cell phone calls placed at a hotel by prominent U.S. persons the Russian government may use as compromat in the 2024 election. Here's looking at you, Lady G. Lindsey Graham's name is being tossed around as one of the people who may be implicated in that. And House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer is now conceding in a recent interview that his impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden may very well not result in an actual impeachment vote. How about that? Predicted that for you at last week's Hangout, and I think I might have gotten one right. Just to be clear, as longtime Washington reporter Todd Zwillich says, just so everyone's clear, this would mean that Russia successfully used Senators Grassley, Congressman Comer, Fox News, and others to damage the President of the United States and make fake info about him an article of faith on the right. To be even more clear, it is not too hyperbolic to say that Vladimir Putin was behind Republican efforts to impeach President Biden. Yeah, really. It's absolutely bonkers, this headline breaking on Tuesday afternoon. I'll come back to that in the audio section with a few clips for you. But now on to some other news headlines that aren't quite as crazy, but still matter a lot. In a related story, President Biden said yesterday his administration will announce major sanctions Friday to hold Russia accountable for the death last week of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny. President Biden confirmed the forthcoming package to reporters before leaving for a campaign trip to the West Coast. Of course, the most punishing thing you could do to Putin and Russia is fund Ukraine's war effort against their illegal invasion. But that isn't happening anytime soon because Congress, of course, is out on vacation, apparently. Latest on the Kansas City shootings. 2 men have been charged with murder in Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl parade shooting that killed 1 woman and injured more than 20 people last week. The charges were announced against the men in a news briefing Tuesday afternoon. And this is a huge story yesterday, very controversial. At the United Nations, the U.S. vetoed a UN Security Council vote on resolution calling for an immediate end to the war in Gaza. Algeria introduced the resolution in hopes of showing how broad the support for ceasefire is. The U.S. has circulated an alternative draft resolution, which instead calls for a temporary pause in the fighting as part of hostage negotiations and opposes any ground operation in Rafah. The latest good news on inflation. Few prices are as visible to Americans as the ones they encounter at the grocery store or drive-through window, which is why 2 years of rapid food inflation have been a major drag for U.S. households and the Biden administration politically. But now the trend in grocery and restaurant inflation appears to be on the cusp of changing. Read more about that at the New York Times. Cost of food at home climbed a notably slower clip in January, and from packaged food providers to restaurant chains, companies across the food business are reporting that they are no longer raising prices as steeply. So that we would qualify as a good news story. And this is another bonker story. Alabama's Supreme Court has ruled that frozen embryos are children. Frozen embryos are children under state law and subject to legislation dealing with the wrongful death of a minor, stating that it applies to unborn children regardless of their location. This is really wild. The court issued this majority decision in a lawsuit brought forth by a group of in vitro fertilization patients whose frozen embryos were destroyed in December 2020 when a patient removed the embryos from a cryogenic storage unit and dropped them on the ground. But the implications here could be far and wide for anybody who has had their embryos frozen. News out of the Supreme Court yesterday that they cleared the way for use of admissions criteria intended to diversify the student body of an elite public school in high school in Virginia, declining to hear a challenge to the school's policy. By turning down the case, a majority of the court's justices signaled that they were not ready to revisit the role that race can legally play in school admissions months after the court sharply curtailed affirmative action programs in higher education. So I guess you can't do it in high schools. Interesting case there that I'll have to unpack with Segall next time that we talk. The Washington Post reporting, as well as other outlets, an international coalition of law enforcement agencies in 11 countries working together announced yesterday it had taken control of computers and software at the heart of the world's most prolific ransomware group, giving victims hope that they won't be forced to make ransom payments to recover data stolen from their computer systems. This is a huge story. Lockbit's malware had been used in as many as 2,000 ransomware attacks in the last 2 years, and an 11-nation operation has taken down the world's most harmful cyber criminal group. That is awesome news. President Biden raised $42 million in January for his re-election campaign, a bright spot as his polling numbers remain stubbornly low. And that's all I've got for you on today's headlines. Let's get to that audio potpourri of clips, starting with the big news that I mentioned. And when it's a big headline like this, I like to see how it is worded and presented on the nightly news programs. I go to NBC's Lester Holt and Gabe Gutierrez for this big story about the Republicans' key witness, key informant they were relying on to impeach Joe Biden was working for the Russians.
Gabe, I know you're tracking new information about the man accused of lying to the FBI about President Biden and his son.
Yes, Lester, federal prosecutors say Alexander Smirnov, the FBI informant now accused of lying about Biden family business dealings, met with Russian intelligence officials in November. Smirnov's lawyers in Las Vegas say he's presumed innocent and should be released on bail, Lester.
All right, Gabe Gutierrez, thank you.
Thank you, Gabe Gutierrez. But let's head over to CNN, where Evan Perez, who's national security correspondent, legal correspondent, has more.
Alexander Smirnov, was behind those very damaging allegations against President Biden. One of the things he said to the FBI in 2020 was that he had information indicating that Hunter Biden, his son, and the then former vice president were going to get $5 million apiece in order to help fix some business for Burisma, which was a Ukrainian energy company. According to the FBI, according to the Justice Department, none of that is true. He is charged with lying to the FBI and falsifying records. Now, what this new court filing, which just came in the last hour, says that after Smirnov was arrested by the FBI last week, he said the following. He said that Smirnov admitted that officials associated with Russian Russian intelligence were involved in passing a story about Hunter Biden. Business person one is what the Justice Department refers to in this filing, but it is Hunter Biden that they are referring to. Now, Smirnov is due before a judge in the next few minutes. Wolf, the FBI and the Justice Department want him to remain detained while he faces these new charges, and so we'll find out whether a judge agrees to keep him detained. But one of the arguments that the Justice Department is making is that he has extensive contacts with intelligence officers not only in Russia but in other countries as well, and they say that he poses a flight risk. Wolf?
Well, he does pose a flight risk, it would seem, and right-wing media relied on that guy. Republicans relied on that guy in the House to impeach President Biden and to implicate his son, Hunter Biden. It's all bullshit. It's all a lie. He got caught. DOJ arrested him, and apparently the Russians were passing him that information. How soon we forget. I mean, we've seen this before, obviously, with Trump in 2016, and the pattern repeats itself. It's so bad, and I'm sure we're going to have to unpack that in the days and weeks to come for sure. All right, Nikki Haley did quite a rope-a-dope on media yesterday. She said she had a major announcement. A lot of people speculated she might be dropping out. Of course, the primary in South Carolina, where she was the governor, is this Saturday. And instead, she brought them all there so that she could pound on Trump and say, in fact, she's not dropping out. It was a rally/press conference, and here's a little bit of what she had to say.
Some of you, perhaps a few of you in the media, came here today to see if I'm dropping out of the race. Well, I'm not.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Here's a little bit more from Nikki Haley.
Now, I know what Donald Trump is saying. He wants an election with no opponent. Yeah. But that's not what the voters are saying. Despite being a de facto incumbent, Donald Trump lost 49% of the vote in Iowa. In New Hampshire, Trump lost 46% of the vote. That's not good. We're talking about almost half of our voters. What does it say about an incumbent who's losing nearly half of his party? It spells disaster in November. We shouldn't silence those voters like Trump wants. They have the right to keep speaking out.
All right, there's Nikki Haley yesterday at a rally, and she's been saying a lot of the right things in these past couple of weeks, but it's far too late. She's going to get shellacked on Saturday, is I think everybody's prediction. So let's move on to something else. How about this clip? Yesterday, Nancy Pelosi sat down with a foreign reporter whose name is Tim Sebastian. He hosts a show called Conflict Zone. She was at the Munich Security Conference, and she's called Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's conduct during the Israeli-Hamas war, quote, inexcusable, but she stood by Israel's right to defend itself when pressed by a reporter at the Munich Security Conference. And here's that.
If you don't like what Israel is doing, and the president has made it clear that some of what Israel is doing he doesn't like,
that's right.
and you go on supplying them with hardware to do those things, you own this operation every bit as much as they do, don't you?
No, we don't. We don't. We have always supported Israel as our national security friend, largely because it was in our interest to do so. Largely because it was in to do so. We had shared values that only democracy in the region. The behavior of Netanyahu is, in my view, inexcusable in terms of how it has affected the collateral damage to children and families and the rest. But nobody can take away the right of any country to defend itself that has been brutally attacked in that way.
Last week, the EU's foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, wondered aloud why the US isn't doing more to have its warnings taken seriously in Jerusalem. If you believe, he said, that too many people are being killed, maybe you should provide fewer arms in order to prevent so many people being killed. He's got a point, hasn't he?
Israel is very well equipped with weaponry. There's nothing that we have sent since October 7th that has contributed to this brutality. In the longer run, they're in a dangerous neighborhood, and we will continue to support Israel.
Yeah, that's tough to take, tough to hear, but there you go. That's Nancy Pelosi yesterday at the Munich Security Conference. And apparently President Biden is telling his campaign people to do more to get out the crazy shit that Donald Trump says all the time. And apparently those were his exact words, which is why CNN political reporter MJ Lee uttered those words. She just said the word shit on CNN yesterday. I thought it was kind of funny and news at the same time. Here she is.
Yeah, Brianna, what we've learned is that President Biden himself personally instructed some of his top campaign aides to be even more aggressive in highlighting some of President Trump's more inflammatory and wild comments. We are told that the thrust of the president's direction was to significantly ramp up the campaign's efforts to highlight the crazy shit that Trump says in public.
That's amazing. I love it. I love that reporting that she just said that just like he said it. And what could go wrong? What could go wrong? Sounds like a good strategy to me. And Jon Stewart was back hosting the Daily Show because it's Monday. He hosts the show on Monday, and he put Tucker Carlson in his crosshairs, as he has, of course, in the past. You got to see the segment. I watched the whole thing. I thought it was great. I thought it was great last week, too. A lot of people criticized him, but here it is. Last night, Jon Stewart in the Daily Show for your daily laughs here at the end of the news segment.
Where do I go to study the particulars of unquestioning propaganda? I would need mentorship.
We're in Moscow tonight. We're here to interview the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin.
Saints be praised. For Professor Tucker Aloysius Mayflower Kenny Bunkport Backgammon Carlson III has arrived. Professor, tell me, what is step one in delivering world-class fealty to power?
Here's why we're doing it. First, because it's our job. We're in journalism.
Lie about what your job is.
We're in journalism. Our duty is to inform people.
Lie about what your duty is.
Americans have a right to know all they can about a war they're implicated in. Freedom of speech is our birthright. We were born with the right to say what we believe.
Oh, shit. Kudos, Sensei. That was deep. I have much to learn. Disguise your deception and capitulation to power as noble and moral and based in freedom. Yes, master.
All right, there you go. Jon Stewart, The Daily Show, last night. So great to have him back, in my opinion. All right, well, that's it. That is your news, your headlines. Thank you very much for pressing play on it today. Now time to get to my guest. Of course, you know him, you love him. Most of you do, at least. He is a very thoughtful, brilliant, great friend of mine and ours in the show, and has been for a long time. He's a constitutional law professor at Georgia State University. He's the author of two great books, Supreme Myths and Originalism as Faith. He's become one of the most respected constitutional law scholars in the country, and we're very happy anytime he's able to join us. We covered a lot of ground on today's show. Look for the clips I shared on social media about him talking about guns, why we have 400 million guns. He basically breaks it down in about 85 seconds, and I shared that already everywhere that I live on social media, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, the rest. So check it out. You can follow him on TikTok and Twitter and elsewhere. We started with him complaining about how much of a Luddite he is. He just is terrible around computers and phones and technology, and then we get into it.
I don't know, Pete. There's something about, you know what? I think I'm too impatient for technology.
Oh, it's interesting.
I have a lot of patience for things. People have always said I have a pretty good shoulder to lean on and that kind of stuff.
Sure.
But when it comes to technology, I just want it done.
Well, I think what's most important about you is, luckily, you are very literate and an excellent writer and communicator. And so as long as you're able to read and write and interpret things the way that you have been, we are so happy to accommodate you with whatever technology will possibly broadcast your voice and face. So let's do that now, shall we? Are you ready to get into the...
I guess, unless I should tell my last technology story about Professor Lawrence Tribe.
Well, I just saw the ratings are skyrocketing on this conversation, on this episode. Yeah, so go ahead.
They really turn to law. Never mind. Turn to law. Go ahead.
Last week tonight with John Oliver last night, where he did a deep dive into Clarence Thomas yet?
So here's the truth. You wrote me yesterday very nicely. You told me to watch it. My life has been a living hell.
That's fine.
Since,
I should have told you
but
before
I'm
the
going
interview.
to watch that too.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah. I don't know how.
It's very good. Everybody should watch it. You can watch it on YouTube if you don't have HBO. I'm going to ask you to begin with, what are we waiting on right now in the Supreme Court when it comes to Trump and immunity? Because it seems like you and others are basically doing the whole, maybe today will be the day, and maybe President's Day will be the day that Donald Trump finds out that he can run. Like, what are we waiting for?
Sure. So first of all, there's two lawsuits going on. Well, for the Florida criminal suit where he took classified documents, and for the New York suit where he's alleged, not the New York civil suit that he just got ordered to pay $380 million, but the D.C. case brought by Jack Smith based on the election. He is asking the Supreme Court to make it. We all find this funny, to say that presidents can never, ever, ever be subject to criminal prosecution for anything they do in office unless they are impeached first. It is one of the dumbest arguments ever made to the United States.
And a lower court, we talked about this, the lower court have already decided unanimously.
Yes.
They made the arguments.
Yes.
We heard the arguments. The whole Navy SEAL. Could a Navy SEAL kill your political opponent? So we're waiting on the Supreme Court to decide on that.
Yes. And they're going to decide he has no immunity. That's not they're not, he's going to lose that case. There's no question. Whether it's 6-3 or 9-0, I suspect it's either 7-2 or 9-0. I am confident predicting he will not be given immunity. There's no chance.
All right. But that could come.
But the biggest thing we're waiting for is for the Supreme Court to rule in the Colorado Section 2 case, Section 3, disqualification case. That's the big one.
And just to be clear, both these cases, it would be shocking if the result were other than what pretty much everybody is saying it will be. They will not find that he has immunity, that any president does from committing crimes, and they also will not find for the Colorado Supreme Court and other states that he cannot be on the ballot as a result of the insurrection January 6th.
There's no chance they disqualify him. As far as immunity goes, Pete, can I say it's a little more complicated?
Sure.
They're not going to say he has no immunity. They're going to say you don't have absolute criminal immunity. Now, here's the interesting thing your audience should know about this. And I spent a lot of time thinking about this issue with a colleague of mine, because it's actually a very important issue, Pete, because I'll tell you what we don't want. We don't want in the future red state prosecutors or federal prosecutors under Donald Trump, bringing bogus criminal cases against Democrat presidents, which really, really happened. In fact, it's likely to happen. So there has to be some immunity. And I think, let's just forget law for the minute. We have a democracy, a constitutional representative democracy. And we have a president who's both the chief executive officer and, sadly, our highest symbolic, goes to funerals and makes us feel better in times of crisis. In most countries, that division is done differently.
Yeah, they have a president and a prime minister type of thing.
And I think Ronald Reagan would have been the best European president ever. If all he had to do was give speeches, he was great at giving speeches. But being a president, he was awful and destroyed America. So they divide that up to people who can give speeches and people who can run things. We should do the same, but we haven't. But so here's the thing: if the president is engaging in an official act, that's really an official act that the president's required to do. So let's say we have some troops out in the Middle East someplace.
Well, look at the Red Sea right now in combat in ways they haven't been since World War II, and tell me about that coalition of countries stopping the Houthi rebels. Maybe that's the real life example.
Well, I want to be very general about this, but assume the president is doing something that the commander-in-chief is clearly allowed to do, even if it's really stupid and harmful, but it's clearly something the commander-in-chief, he has to have immunity for that, Pete. But the question is if he's doing his official job, he should have immunity. Both because if he's doing his official job, it can't violate federal law. And if he's doing his official job, states can't make his official job illegal. States can't make what the president does that's legal under federal law illegal under state law. We can't let states do that. So it's two sides of the same coin. If he's doing something that's part of his official duties, he should have immunity, and he will have immunity. But if he's doing something not part of his official duties and it violates the criminal law, then he should be subject to prosecution. So when the president of the United States called the Secretary of State of Georgia and tried to coerce him to find exactly the number of votes that he needed, just one more than he needed to go over the top, many of us believe that phone call broke the law. That phone call was not part of his official duties. It's not the president's duties to run his reelection campaign out of the White House. That's just not part of his official duties. So he can't have criminal immunity for that because it wasn't part of his official duties. Now, if he had an underling call up some administrative person in Georgia just to say, the White House works with Congress in safeguarding federal elections, and we're curious about these 3 questions, not asking for anything. Can you give us some helpful answers to this? Well, arguably, the president has some responsibility to make sure federal elections go off safely and securely. And done that way, it'd be a much harder question. Maybe that is part of his duties, in which case he would have immunity. The point I'm making is, if it's part of his duties, it's not criminal. If it's criminal, it's not part of his duties.
Very well said, and I think I understand it perfectly well. He can't go downstairs to the White House kitchen and kill somebody.
Right. He can go down to the White House kitchen and order other people to kill as commander-in-chief halfway around the world, and we're not going to second-guess that. We're not going to, because he has the commander-in-chief power to do that.
But he can't say, kill the chef, I don't like my meatballs.
That's not part of his duties.
Right.
Or more likely kill somebody on Fifth Avenue in cold blood, which I still say someday he's going to do.
Yeah, no, I don't think he'll ever actually kill anybody with his own hands because he doesn't want to. It would be too strenuous to even pull the trigger for the man.
Yeah, Pete, I just can't. I got to just throw this in here for your audience. I just, we make fun of it and we laugh and stuff. I still, the psychic pain that this man is still something you and I have to talk about.
Well, everybody, the pain is shared and spread throughout the world.
Yeah, it is just, and by the way, this time, I think what I said last time was this is a bet your country president that he could absolutely lead to an existential crisis. Yep. This time, what I'm saying is this could lead to a world crisis.
For sure.
This could,
Yeah, no, I mean, yesterday Liz Cheney said on CNN that the Putin wing of the Republican Party could soon be in the West Wing of the White House.
God, that's just the Tucker Carlson, right? So I kind of want to make this point very quickly. Somewhere in the early 2010s, 13, 14, 15, or 16, Bill Maher did a thing on why the Republican Party was lurching very closely to Putin, why they were going to Russia, why those senators went to Russia, why Fox News started getting a little bit soft on Russia, all this stuff. And Bill Maher's answer at the time, you and I actually talked about this. You do 1,000 podcasts a week, so you wouldn't remember, but I remember this very clearly. And what we both said about Bill Maher's comment that I'm about to give was that, well, maybe that's right, but it sounds far-fetched. No, he was 100% right. What he said was the Republican Party is attracted to Putin for 2 reasons. The first one being the major one. It's all white. Russia's all white. That's what it's about. So it's once again in America, it's race. They love the fact that it's all white. You can go for there are a lot of Asians, of course, but you don't see black people in Russia, and that's what Bill Maher said. And I think with Tucker Carlson saying that the city is prettier, all these code words for white, I think Bill Maher was exactly right. The other thing, of course, was in 2012, Putin enacted the most stringent anti-LGBTQ law in Russian history. Yeah. And what that did, according to Sarah Posner, who wrote the book Unholy, is evangelical leaders went to Russia and studied what Putin did, and they loved it. They loved what he did, and they wanted to do it here.
I don't recall that. I've interviewed Sarah 3 times as a result of you turning me on to her work. But maybe the last time I did talk to her. But and now I guess the attraction is overwhelmingly just to authoritarianism and strong men in general. The right in America is attracted to strong men, which is ironic because it seems a little gay.
Well, I was going to say it's ironic because you would think they would be for liberty and freedom, liberty and freedom, liberty and freedom. But now what we've learned is that just means liberty and freedom for very wealthy women.
I always feel like I've always felt like it waters down. It's always interesting to remind people that there are like 18 states, I think, including Florida, that still allow corporal punishment in schools. So the headmaster or principal or whoever can hit a kid with the paddle. And I feel like that's the kind of authoritarianism that plays out in their parenting, in every part of their lives, in their marriages. Often it's just a threat. And I think if I were to go further, I think it's pretty common that is also connected to a lot of, fundamentalist religions, and certainly Christian nationalism, that idea of authoritarianism for men and subservience for women and everything. It's not obviously explains everything. It's not played out in every Republican, but it certainly does seem to be a main threat and attraction, back to your point, to Putin, who's all those things.
Yep. Tomorrow, we're taping that on Wednesday, but we're taping this Monday at 1:48. tomorrow I am taping a Supreme Myths podcast with a woman who is a devout, she's head of the Baptist something, but her life mission, and she's great at it, is trying to convince America that Christian nationalism is A, not Christian, B, not nationalism in any American sense of that word.
Talked to her.
But I'm having a senior moment on her name. I'm going to prepare this evening, but the reason I'm excited to talk to her, Pete, is she is a very serious person of faith, Christian faith, who hates Christian nationalism. So I'm very excited about that. I think Christian nationalism is, in fact, our biggest threat, Pete. It's a bigger threat than Trump. Trump was able to galvanize, like Ed Meese did in 1980, the Christian evangelical movement. But that's really the threat to America. It is Christian evangelicals who are anti-LGBTQ. Yes. It is Christian evangelicals who are coming after your birth control, Pete Dominic. Your birth control in 3 years from now might be illegal, and so on and so forth.
Well, if you watch closely, I mean, I don't know if you saw that rally where he was at the sneaker festival the other day, SneakerCon, and a woman runs up on stage with him. And at first she doesn't know what the hell's happening. And then she says she's a Christian and Trump is a great Christian. And if any reporter who covers that beat and even like your Jordan Kleppers or from Comedy Central who goes to the rallies and anybody who watched January 6th, there's like an overt thread of this Christian nationalism and his supporters.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, no, I mean, he does not become president without Jerry Falwell Jr.
Right.
There's no question about that.
So speaking of that, I was actually going to ask you about some religious stuff as it relates to the Constitution. I did see you, I don't know, it seems like you were tweeting about it. Like, what was that Catholic priest tweet about that you put out? I had a weird experience at a Catholic church last week when I went to give blood and I walked out and heard the priest giving a sermon.
I don't know, Pete. I'm sorry. I don't know what you're referring to.
I'll get it for you. But
a Catholic priest.
You tweeted something. You shared this tweet. You should never attack a priest, even when it's an error. Rather, you should pray and do penance that God grant him grace again. When a priest fails,
right.
Extend him a helping hand through prayer. God will be his judge. Whoever voices judgment over a priest has voiced it over Christ. And you tweeted about how terrible that was. I don't know where it came from, but listeners reached out to me and shared it with me.
Well, here's where it came from. I'm not going to tell the story again because I've told it to you. I've told it to your audience before. But in 1991, before a lot of the stuff about Catholic priest abuse came out, I saw firsthand at a meeting that I was at that the Archdiocese of San Francisco had to deal with a priest who was, clearly molesting kids, and their way of dealing with it in 1991 was to send him to Minnesota, give him 2 weeks of education, so they said, and then put him right back in it.
That's
right back. So you know what, people, just watch that movie Spotlight. It's an amazing movie. Right. And what happened in Boston happened in Chicago and Atlanta and Phoenix and Dallas and Seattle and Portland. Everywhere.
The end in the end credits, they scroll up every parish or archdiocese in America, and it's like every city everywhere. By the way, you know what? The other doesn't get as much attention. The Boy Scouts of America, that went undercover to a certain extent. There's a huge lawsuit. True. I mean, it got covered extensively, and it was a years-long, generations-long abuse scandal. But I mean, I've now heard from some of the victims directly, and it's terrible that now we have to protect our kids in public schools now from these people in my town, and they're threatening to take their kids out of public our LGBT accommodations, if you will, and to put their kids. They're saying we're going to take our kids out of public school and put them in Catholic school. I'm like, well, if you're afraid of the gay kids, then good luck with the priests. Have fun over there.
That's not fun. That's not funny, but it is.
It is funny, actually. Yeah. It is funny to point to the hypocrisy of people who are going to act like they're afraid of public school educators more than Catholic schools.
Can I share with you what went through my mind when you said that? Because I think it's interesting. Sure. And then you can tell me it's not. And always take it out if you want. So when you were saying all that, I've been talking on your show, for 30 years. I mean, not 30 years, for as many years I've been on your show about this thing that happened to me 30 years ago that really affected me. And believe me, no one is more upset about the Catholic Church Georgia's institutional abuse of children than I am. But when you were saying all that, what went through my mind, Pete, was somehow that's only the second biggest issue that kids in these kind of schools have to face. The biggest issue they have to face is gun violence. And I was thinking, like, we've moved from a world where, like, being afraid of having your kid shot in school, Pete, is just normal. Like, I know the odds are small. I get all that. But can we talk about the Kansas City thing for a minute?
Yeah, I would just say, like, that's not connected to, you're saying
that's a separate issue. I'm just saying.
I would say, I would just say, and it should be mentioned always, that the leading cause of death of adolescents in America is gun violence. So whether it's in schools or themselves or in domestic violence or gang violence, that's the leading cause of death. It's not drowning. It's not poison. It's not cancer or disease. It's gun violence. And I think as a child, as a young person, to have that be a concern, of course, is something that we didn't have, and it's hard for us to relate to our kids, thinking about adding that to their anxiety. But yeah, Kansas City, the shooting there at the end of the parade.
So what I'd like to do, but if you tell me it's inappropriate, then we'll move on to a different topic. I heard something on someone else's podcast that was so moving and made me cry. And I won't be able to even tell you without crying, probably. But it was so moving to me that I really want to share it, if that's okay. But I mean, it would be
the fact that it's on someone else's podcast is why it's not okay.
I can't share it.
Well, you're going to promote somebody else's work, no matter how great it is, here on my podcast.
How about I just promote the person who's not a competitor?
I was joking. I was joking. A whole thing's a joke. Please.
So this is how I understand this story as I took it. There is a person who was born and bred and is Kansas City to the bone. Like, his whole life is Kansas City. And he's a sports guy, and he was always a local sports guy in Kansas City and kind of a local Kansas City sports hero. I mean, Atlanta, we had guys like Eddie Johnson is now on TNT, the basketball show. His father was a longstanding Braves announcer for 50 years, and he was part of the community. Like, he was a hero to the community. This guy's the same way in Kansas City. And he's such a hero that when he got promoted to the national level, he's doing Fox 1 during the Kansas City Chiefs parade. And his name is Nick Wright. And this is the story I heard him tell, Pete. He said, "This is basically the happiest moment of my professional life. I have reached a point now where I'm on the stage overlooking this parade. I am being hugged by Patrick Mahomes. I am being hugged by Kelsey. I am being hugged by Andy Reid. I have reached my professional pinnacle, and it's the happiest professional moment of my life. It's not there's no second. And that's 1 second. Then he hears something in his ear. This is going to be hard for me. I'm sorry. He hears something in his ear, and it's New York. And New York is saying to him, you need to get to safety. There's 2 security guys at the end of the stage. Do it right now. Don't ask any questions. Just get to safety. He realized what was happening. And then he heard, and he described it. It's one thing. It's what he said on this podcast. It's one thing to hear a handgun go off. That's one sound. But to hear the rat, tat, tat of multiple bullets all at the same time.
Yeah.
In a crowd of 800,000 people. In a crowd of 800,000 people, all dressed in red, white, black, green, yellow, every nationality, every religion, a totally fantastic moment for the city of Kansas City and for him. And then he realizes his wife is in the audience in the parade, and he doesn't know where she is. And the way he describes it is, it goes from the happiest moment of my professional life to the saddest moment of my life, period. The scariest, because I don't know where my wife is. I don't know if she's alive. And then so he tells that, and then at the end of it, he goes, and then there's something else. 2 years ago, my best friend, a sportscaster in Chicago, was in Highland Park when they had a mass shooting there.
Yeah.
And I remember calling him to make sure he was okay. And of course, I got that call 1 minute after it hit the news. Yeah. And I'm thinking, how are we both in a this kind of gun disaster? Like, best friend. One in Chicago, one in Kansas. I mean, the whole thing, Pete, is just, this has to change. Like, I don't know.
Sounds like you're against
freedom. It's like we're not a country.
Sounds like you're against freedom.
And you know what's even crazier, Pete? This is what comes back to me.
It sounds like you hate the Second Amendment.
It comes down to one. This is going to sound like I am totally oversimplifying.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm doing on purpose, because that's what we're there. All that nuance, that powerful, thing that you just shared. It's like, it's crazy to think that people just simplify it to that. That's freedom. It's our rights, and that's it.
What I want to say is, in 1973, the NRA was one of the best public interest organizations in America. It was all for gun safety and gun regulation, and it was all about keeping people safe.
Yeah,
and then it changed to profits.
Yeah.
Then it hired some law professors, paid them under the table to make these ridiculous arguments about the Second Amendment. At that moment in time in the 70s, when that started, it didn't happen in 2008, but it started in the late 70s. The Chief Justice Warren Burger said, Republican gun-toting ex-Chief Justice Warren Burger, at one point said, the idea the Second Amendment protects the individual right to own guns is a fraud on the American people. He didn't say it was a mistake. Yeah. He didn't say it was inaccurate. He didn't say it was originalism. But no, what he said was it's a fraud. And he used that word fraud very carefully because he knows what it was. And then, Pete, all this was Justice Scalia's revenge for Roe versus Wade. Honest to God, it wasn't that much more complicated than that. He wanted the right wing to have a Roe. And that's why he wrote Heller the way he did. Because he knows as well as anybody that the words a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, should not be deleted from the United States Constitution. And he deleted those words from the United States. The great textualist deleted those words from the United States Constitution. And that's why we have 420 million guns in America today. I don't know, Pete. Since I'm not a gun person. I'm from New York. I understand. I have friends who love their guns. I get it. What I don't understand, and what I can't in this life get my arms around, is how other countries see kids get killed in school and take radical action. And we see kids being gunned down in school, and we get worse.
Well, I think you can understand that. We're a very violent culture, and our we have the way it was in the Civil War and all of the pain that people, the violence we see in films we lead with, and it's like, we don't care that much about each other. The individualist streak. I only care about the people that I know. I mean, I feel like we're a very violent culture for a lot of reasons, and we always have been. And it makes sense. It makes sense to me. It's more about the individual.
But Pete, kids.
If you believe that your guns will protect your kids from being shot by other people's guns, it's not that hard to understand. They believe that.
But you and I both know there's no evidence for that at all.
It doesn't matter. That doesn't matter, obviously.
I know.
I mean,
anyway,
the question has always been, to me, I worry more now about my own safety because of what's going on in my town. And so from time to time, I think about, do I need to protect myself? And I consider it, in terms of weapons. But I always come back to the science and the data and the fact that the weapon would definitely put me in more danger.
Right.
And potentially I would use it on myself. Potentially your kid could use it. Potentially it's just an accident. Those are far more than someone ever invading my home. And so in the end, it's a fairly easy decision. Most people don't get there, but they're scared.
Right.
I think it's going to protect them.
So Pete,
that's why I just had this Captain America shield. I have Thor's hammer. That's all I have here.
I could use Thor's hammer. I want to talk about the Georgia case real quick. Can we do that?
Yes, as long as you don't disparage Fani Willis or anything that she said, because I'm frankly not interested in your analysis.
I'm going to do it a different way. Can we play?
What I'm interested in is the outcome of her case, not anything that she's done in any way to compromise it.
I promise you will enjoy this brand new format Segall is bringing to the Pete Dominic podcast.
Yeah, no matter what, I know where I'm not really that interested in the criticism.
You be
of her.
the judge. Let's play You Be the Judge. Can we do that?
Well, as long as it's not criticizing Fani Willis.
I'm just going to state facts. Am I allowed to state facts? My point. I don't want to criticize her.
Good luck.
Stop me when I start criticizing her, okay? The first thing I want to say is liberals and progressives and even libertarians like your friend and my friend, Clark Nelly, who's been on the show a lot, who is terrible for guns but is fantastic on criminal justice issues. Clark does more for criminal justice issues than any liberal or progressive in the United States. He's really good at it.
No, he doesn't, but go ahead.
He's really good at it.
Yeah, but he doesn't do more than any liberal progressive.
I understand.
This is about 1 billion people that are...
More than anybody not on the left. More than anybody not on the left.
I will give you. Yep.
Okay. So liberals and progressives need to keep in mind that we should keep a critical eye on prosecutors as a general proposition, regardless of who's being prosecuted. Is that fair?
I think that what you're trying to say is the point that I said. Let's be clear. Bonnie Willis is a black woman prosecuting Donald Trump, but she's still a prosecutor, and most likely, and people were bringing up Cop City in Atlanta, most likely her office is prosecuting young black men more than anybody else. And that, I think, is more than fair to say about prosecutors in general versus, say, the public defenders who do a lot more every day than Clark Neely does before he wakes up.
I'm not sure that's true institutionally, but leave that aside.
Fair enough.
So we agree. So we agree that liberals and progressives should not, and anybody who thinks the American criminal justice system, through its plea bargaining disaster and through the racial aspects of it, anyone who's concerned about that shouldn't say, "Well, the defendant's terrible, so I'm not."
I fully agree that we should be careful getting behind prosecutors. Yeah.
Okay. Now let's set the
because
stage.
of the system prosecuting poor people.
I'm really going to try really hard not to criticize this person. So let's set the stage. We're going to file a criminal case against the president of the United States. It's going to be one of the biggest criminal cases in American history ever. And most importantly to me, the worst thing, strike that, the most obvious thing Trump did to overthrow the election was the phone call he made to Georgia. Like it was Georgia where he said, "Get me one more vote than I need." Basically. Right. So it's important the Georgia case continue because that's where the phone call happened. Like it's, that evidence needs to get into the American people. I mean, all that stuff. All right. So now she asked a guy named Roy Barnes to take the case. Roy Barnes is a former governor of Georgia. Roy Barnes is one of the top 10 lawyers I've ever seen in person. Roy Barnes, he's an old Southern guy, and if my life were on the line, or if I would hire him tomorrow. Like, he's a great lawyer. He's a great lawyer because he has that Southern way, and he also is incredibly smart. And he was a great governor, and he was partly responsible for getting our Confederate flag made not quite as terrible. He said no. He's too old, too tired, doesn't want a security thing, all that stuff. So eventually she settles on who she describes as a good friend of hers. And she hires him. Then according to her, now, at that moment in time, Pete, from what I can tell from the experts, I'm not an expert on criminal prosecution ethics, but I have gotten to be much more of a knowledgeable person on this in the last 2 months. The experts tell me that if she had been romantically involved with him on the day she hired him, then the case would be a disaster. It would have to go away. But so that's a start, Pete. You got to accept that starting point. All the legal ethics people agree. If they had been romantically dating on the day she assigned him this case, we'd have a big, big problem. But they say they weren't, and I believe them. They say they weren't, and I believe them. They say they were good friends, and the romance started 4 months later, 4 months after the suit was filed. Pete, we can't have prosecutors doling out to other prosecutors who don't have a lot of criminal law experience the most important criminal law case in Georgia history and maybe American history, based on a personal relationship. It has to be who's best for the job.
Yeah, nobody cares. Nobody cares about that. I'm just telling you that the public does not care about legal ethics here, because I know this sounds foreign to you because you're such a principled person, regardless of who's doing it. You're always consistent. It's what I have the most respect for you. I'm telling you what I hear. What I hear is this. If somebody does make some mistake that is maybe, unethical, slightly unethical, but they're prosecuting someone who has destroyed everything that we know, I don't care. I don't care about their ethics. Now, I don't necessarily support that. I like to try to be as consistent as possible. But the public does not care about Bonnie Willis's relationship with this prosecutor. And I'm not going to speak for black folks, but overwhelmingly, they do not want to see her be in any way put in a critical light. That's what I'm hearing and seeing, and I get the ethical point of view, but the idea is she's prosecuting Donald Trump and 19 other people who tried to overthrow democracy, and we just don't care.
By the way, I'm going to respond to you, but I'd like to have a humorous note before we do. I had told you before on the show that one of the lawyers, Segall, had called me to ask me to work on the case with him. And I said, no, I will not work on any case.
Really?
Yeah. I didn't tell you about this?
I don't think so. Wow.
I'm sitting at my desk, and first I get an email.
The lawyer on what side?
Steve Sadow is representing the lawyer in the Georgia case, or one of the defendants in the Georgia case. He's the and he was
one of the 19 defendants that worked with Trump to.
Yeah.
Oh. He asked you to work on.
I'm sorry, Pete. I really thought I told the story.
Maybe you did.
I was sitting at my desk minding my own business, and I get this email from the lawyer, Steve Sadow, and of one of the Trump defendants, and he says he wants me to work on the case, and I say I would rather have my fingers poked out with bamboo shoots and my eyeballs taken out of me. And he yells, and this is the funny part. He gets really mad on email. Says, I don't understand you. You're a professor. Every defendant deserves representation. Well, I don't pick my clients based on whether I think they're morally good or bad or not. He gives me this whole lecture. And if he'd been talking to me, it was like screaming. Like he was screaming at me by email. And I write him back and I said, well, just for the record, I do believe every criminal defendant in America deserves a lawyer. That's what we have public defenders for. I do not believe every criminal defendant in America gets to get the attorney of his choice. And I definitely don't believe that every criminal defense attorney in America has to represent everybody who walks through their office. And if I had been you, I would have said to Mr. Trump and his co-defendants, I don't want any part of it because you all tried to overturn America. Get out of my office. And you can still be a very successful criminal defense lawyer and do that. You don't need to. But the funny part is this. So I went to a few of my friends confidentially and said, "You won't believe this happened to me. Like, why would he think I would ever help him on this case? Like, he must know. I mean, he knows me. I mean, what? Yeah. But anyway, and I told them that he yelled at me like for a long time. He sent numerous emails where he's yelling at me. Anyway, so on Friday on Thursday when DA Willis was testifying, that lawyer, when it was his turn, he got about 3 minutes in, and she said, and she was right to say it. Why are you yelling at me?
The guy who yelled at you?
Yeah, she said that to him.
The same guy who yelled at you in the email?
Yes. And I put on Twitter, he yelled at me too.
Oh, wow.
He yells at everybody. He's a yeller. That's what he does. It was really funny.
Wow.
Pete, going back to the points you made. Yeah. I don't have the luxury of that position because of the job I do.
Sure.
It'd be easy for me to say. But even, it's Donald Trump. Get him at all costs would be a very easy thing for me to say.
Yeah.
But here's why I'm not saying it, Pete, and why your friends who are saying this shouldn't say it, and why you shouldn't say it, and you're not saying it. But you shouldn't even give lip service to it. It's because whatever this prosecutor is allowed or not allowed to do doesn't end with this case, Pete. It does not end with this case. And one thing that, frankly, Clark has taught me more than I knew before I met Clark, but other people now, as I've looked into it more, like the New Orleans District Attorney Office, of which they made is corrupt beyond imagination. I mean, Pete, it is.
I'm familiar with it.
Yeah, it is. I had a friend who got mentally sick working.
We have listeners who work in the Orleans Public Defender's Office.
Yeah, and
shout out to Barksdale Hortenstein Jr. Yeah,
I'm sure. You will hear stories that would curl your toes.
I've heard them.
From that.
Yes.
But it's not just New Orleans, of course. Nope. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
And so obviously you know this, the group of people who are hurt the most by prosecutorial abuse, and it's not close, are black citizens.
You don't want prosecutorial abuse anywhere because who it generally falls on. Yeah. I think that's
what she did, I'm not going to criticize, but what she did was, I think, make a slight error in judgment, because this case had to be every T crossed and every I dotted with absolute clean precision.
Yep.
And this messed it all up.
Well, that's my only real question I want to know your analysis of is what is not what precedent does this create for future prosecutors to do more damage to black and brown poor folks or vulnerable folks of any kind. My question is, what's going to happen with this case?
So that's, and I'll answer it. Well, here's what we don't know. Last week, the former lawyer for the prosecutor and former legal partner of the prosecutor who's trying the case and who was a romantic interest of the DA for a while, he had sent a text message to a defense lawyer that basically effectively said the affair began before the case was assigned. But he couldn't testify about it because of attorney-client privilege. The judge heard what he was going to say in secret in his chambers. without knowing what the judge heard, Pete, and without knowing that person has every reason and motivation to lie. He does. So I'm not convinced he's telling the truth, but he might be telling the truth. And since I don't know, and no one on the planet except the lawyers in that case and the judge knows what he told the judge in private, we can't answer your question. Because I said to you 2 minutes ago that the legal ethics that, including hold on. I have a legal ethics colleague who in New York Times op-ed, and they wrote him and said, please write an op-ed for us. He's an expert on Georgia law, which I'm not. And he is very clear that if it was romantic the day the lawsuit was filed, then she has to go. She cannot. Her office has to be disqualified.
Yeah, my question is what could the outcome be? The judge
could disqualify her from the case, which would end the case. It would end the case altogether because then it goes to a different committee in Georgia would assign it to a different prosecutor, and there's no prosecutor outside of Fulton County who is likely to continue with this case.
Got it. So another prosecutor could just take her work and continue the case against them, could just take over, but there isn't one.
Correct. And it's already happened in Georgia. We had a case 18 months ago where the prosecutor's office had, well, not Fulton County, but a different one, had to be disqualified, and the people responsible for retrying that case still haven't done it 18 months ago. So this case could end on this, Pete. It could go away. It could end.
And those 19, 18 now, I guess.
Well, only, I think, to the best of my knowledge, like 4 or 5 of the defendants have joined the motion, but they all will, obviously.
All get off. Well, without any.
I think so. I mean, some have pled guilty. I think they're already told. I think they're. Although I don't know if those guilty pleas can be. We don't care. We care about Trump, and Trump will get off.
Well, I care about those others as well. But yeah. Okay. But certainly, yeah.
They will get off. Now, will the judge do that? Part of it depends on what he hears in private, but part of it also depends, I think. I mean, he is the conservative judge, but he's a good judge, Pete. He is good.
He's the guy we've seen on TV, right?
Yes. I have substantial faith in his fairness. That's all I'll say. I have substantial faith in his fairness. Okay. I am sure he's pulling his hair out. I am sure he doesn't know what to do. This is the biggest decision of his professional life by far, and there's nothing even close. If he doesn't disqualify him, not only does the case go on, but he also, is going to get personal threats and all that stuff.
Oh, sure. Sure, he already is.
If he does disqualify him for the rest of the life, if he does disqualify the DA, he's for the rest of the life, he's the guy who got Trump off.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting.
So can I just do one tiny little criticism as we end this thing? I just wish she had thought through this before.
Okay. Thank you for that. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
As you're saying that, I don't know what we would have done without that final comment. What about Robert Hur? Do you have anything to say about this guy, the DOJ, who did the investigation into Biden's classified documents, and in his report talked about how old and senile Joe Biden was? Because now it seems like even a lot of people who I saw and you saw supporting Merrick Garland are saying the fact that he appointed this guy. I wonder what you think about Merrick Garland, Robert Hur, and the I guess the precedent that the report that he put out, and if it was, I don't know.
Well, this actually brings in, it's a great question. I know we're 40 minutes in or whatever, but this goes to a much larger issue that's kind of interesting. So, the independent counsel who investigated Iran-Contra, which eventually the independent counsel said was the highest scandal, the highest executive branch scandal in American history. And as your audience knows, I had a corner of this case when I was at DOJ. That was a Republican investigating a Republican. And that was always the precedent. The precedent was you hire an independent counsel, not of the political party who's antagonistic to the person you're investigating, just for fairness purposes. That all changed. When Ken Starr was substituted for the independent counsel in the Whitewater investigation, which eventually gave us Monica Lewinsky. And once those stupid Republican judges in D.C. did something that really hadn't been done before in a high-profile case, which is given independent prosecution to a Ken Starr, who was simply a partisan Republican. That was a big mistake. So this guy, it's not unusual necessarily that he's what his politics are. I have not had personal knowledge of this controversy because I've been too busy doing other things, but the people I trust who have tell me that they've read the report And all of those comments were unnecessary and ridiculous and should never have been in there. And it's going to really it could potentially put a lot of negativity into Biden's campaign. And it was not relevant to the legal issues and should never have been. But I don't have personal knowledge of that. Those are the experts that I trust on this issue.
What do you think of Merrick Garland, the job he's done?
So I bring to the table a huge bias. One of my closest friends and one of the best people I know, just a person I love because of his heart, among other things, clerked for Merrick Garland and tells me, and has told me for 15 years, told me long before Merrick Garland was nominated to the Supreme Court, that this is one of the best people on the planet, that he is just a man of virtue, a man of values, a man who is not going to go too far in either direction. He's a liberal, but he's just a decent, fair man. I don't know him personally. That person knows him very well, but we have to discount it a little bit because law clerks always love their judges. But that's what I hear from all the Democrats and all the liberals I know, that he, if you second guess him, you better have a lot of facts at your disposal because he does things for a reason. He does things slowly. He does things carefully. It doesn't mean he can predict the future. And I'm sure he didn't know this was going to happen. But I'm not in a position where I'm going. This man was a D.C. Court of Appeals judge for a long, long time. He had an august legal career. I am not going to throw his career in the toilet because he appointed somebody who ended up not being a very good independent prosecutor. I'm just not.
But in relative to other things that he's done or not done, there's reporting that Joe Biden's gotten fed up with him. Obviously, the Hunter Biden investigation, which turned up some, crimes that nobody ever gets charged for. It seems like Hunter Biden was politically prosecuted by the Department of Justice.
One thing I learned when I was at the Department of Justice, and I learned it because I got very lucky and was involved in numerous high-profile first page of the New York Times cases. One of the things that I learned was when the federal government, any government, I guess, does something that you think is the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. You can, in high-profile situations, Pete, it's very hard to predict all the ways that could bounce back in ways that are unpredictable and have unforeseen consequences. And when you're the United States Attorney General and you're a person who tries to act in good faith, which is what he does. I've heard not a single person ever call his good faith into question. I've heard his competence, but not his good faith. It's very hard to. So if they had just said, you know what, this Hunter Biden thing is stupid, it's frivolous, it's just made up, it's just Fox News fantasy. It's Fox News fantasy. That's all it is, and we're not going to do anything about it. You and I sitting here today do not know how that would have played. But believe me, they have those I was part of conversations at the highest levels of government, Pete, on the highest profile cases, where what mattered was how it looked, not what was done. And the reason, and I had this conversation as I was leaving the Department of Justice with a very, very senior person there who'd been there a long time. And I asked him as I was out the door, I said, I'm going to go teach con law for the rest of my life, I hope. I don't understand why this institution, the Department of Justice, I was standing in it, why this institution cares so much about appearances and so little about substance. That's what I said. And his answer was more or less, because it turns out appearances are everything. And I thought, wow, that's...
Yeah, perception. Politics is perception. Appearances are everything. Yeah. And that is what a wonderful or sad, I guess, thing to think and believe and to have heard, but also a testament to your integrity as this conversation has been, as your career has been, of principle, which is why you told me I couldn't run for Congress. You said you can't because you can't lie. And
you and my wife, when I met Lynn, she was 36 when we met. Lynn would have been a hell of a politician. You met Lynn. I'm going to brag on my wife. Shoot me. She would be she could give a great speech. She's pretty, but I told her, but you're not a liar.
Yep. Yeah.
That's and why you're not a liar. And that's what I told you. We had a serious conversation about it.
Yeah, we did. And that's why I've always thought I'd be so good with Lynn.
On that note, my friend, thank you very much.
Where are you going? Is Lynn there?
I got to go find my wife really fast.
Where's Lynn? Oh, she's here.
I have to go find her.
Come on in, Lynn. Say hi to your husband.
I got to go, my friend. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, buddy. I'll talk to you later.
Take care.
Right.
Yeah, bye.
Yeah, there he goes. There he goes. That was fun. I liked to tease. We have a great time, and it's all good fun. Always brilliant, always informative, and we love talking to Eric Segall. Go thank him for joining us, and thank me, for God's sake. No, I appreciate you. I'm thanking you. No need to thank me. My cup is full. You guys have been unbelievable to me now for going on 4 years and long before that, but thank you. I'm so grateful to all of you bumblebees here at the end. I hope you appreciate it. Lots more to come this week. We are far from over, but I am now headed to the mountains. I hope you have an awesome Wednesday. If that's when you're listening to the program or whenever you are, I hope you're doing all right up there. And I look forward to seeing you at our hangout tomorrow night and in Las Vegas, March 22nd and 23rd. Tickets in the show links. More information coming real soon. And I will talk to you tomorrow right here on Stand Up. Tell your friends. Bye-bye. John Carroll, take us out.
On your fence, even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense and you stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town, just stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Oh, you better stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up. We got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up. You got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well